been a weird year at the movies. Like every year, there were big hits and surprise sleepers, but this specific year, it seemed like most of the big hits were surprises that overperformed, and a bunch of the manufactured blockbusters failed. It seemed like there was an endless supply of big budget franchise sequels, and almost all of them underperformed. In fact, only one movie with a budget over $200 million was definitively profitable. 2023 was the year of the Flopbusters, massive budget sequels and remakes that were meant to be blockbusters, but which underperformed or utterly flopped. What on earth happened? Why was this the year of the Flopbusters? Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your theories. Why do you think this was the year of the Flopbusters? Why did so many huge budget films with big IPs, big brand names, fail to perform at the box office? As we go into this, none of these movies have all 10 of them factoring into them. There's exceptions to every single one of these reasons. When you're looking at patterns for an entire year, it's complicated. Every single one of these movies have unique things that worked against them, had unique things in their favor, and so you're looking at a complicated thing. I'm trying to find the patterns where you see it in multiple movies in the year where something seemed off. What are those distinctive things for this year that caused this frequent pattern of movies with a budget over $200 million way underperforming? With that said, let's get started. Reason number one, there were simply too many blockbusters or franchise films. The supply of blockbusters exceeded the demand for blockbusters. If you look back at this year, starting around the beginning of March until mid-August, almost every single week, there was a franchise film, a blockbuster, or something from a studio like Pixar that the studio itself is kind of the brand. And so you got Creed, Scream, Super Mario Brothers, Evil Dead, Marvel, Little Mermaid, Transformers, Pixar, Indiana Jones, Flash, Mission Impossible. Like, it just kept going and going and going. And some of those had reasonable budgets, we'll talk about elsewhere in here, but other ones were movies that had to make $750 million, $1 billion to be profitable, and there simply wasn't enough demand for that many big, gigantic movies at that scale. And a bit of what kind of happened this year is you kind of had the final trickle down of COVID, which back now 4 years ago, you take 9-month break from releasing movies and shooting movies, so everything kind of gets pushed back, and you keep having that backlog of movies that were pushed back and delayed turning into overcrowded marketplaces. And that's what you had this year. Kind of back in February, some of us were speculating this is just going to be crazy good for everybody because there's so many big, gigantic movies. But because there were so many big, gigantic movies, they all just choked each other out. They all stole business from each other. And so they just couldn't perform like they needed to because there were simply too many of them in too small of a market. Reason number two, prices are up. Income is down. This very much is a companion with the last one, but if you know anything about modern day economics, there's been a lot of inflation recently, which means everyday items that are necessities cost more, thus people have less money for non-necessities like going to the movies. So if you look at the last category, you have this gigantic supply of movies, but people only have so much income to go see them. People can only spend so much money at the movies. It doesn't matter how good the movies are that you put out there. It doesn't matter how many of them you put out there. There's too many. And people aren't able to go to the movies enough to justify having that many gigantic budget films in light of how much income people have. They are not going to buy enough tickets to justify that amount of supply of blockbusters. Real quick before we get started, there is a companion video to this over on my Patreon page with 5 things that this year's hits did right. Now, if you don't know what Patreon is, it is a membership site with a bunch of exclusive content. Join at any level and you'll gain access to the companion video, as well as hundreds of past exclusive videos and 2 different weekly live streams that I do. One is a Q&A that I normally do on Saturdays where I answer everybody's questions. They're normally 90 minutes to 2 hours long. The other one is a box office show where I talk about the weekend box office, and a lot of the content in this video is actually coming from discussions I previously had on my Patreon live stream talking about the box office. Join at as little as $2 per month and you get access to all of the different videos I just talked about, or that's $21 per year if you go annual. At $5 per month, you can have your name on the end card of my videos, and at $40 per month, you can have a one-on-one video chat with me every single month that you're a member at that tier. The link is down below in the description if you want to learn more and gain access to that companion video. And let's continue. Reason number 3, the streaming problem. Every studio with a streaming service over the last several years has used their big, expensive movies as hooks to try and get people to sign up for their streaming services, shrinking the theatrical window, putting it on the streaming service closer and closer to the theatrical release date. And then COVID compounded this problem where movie theaters weren't a thing for a while there, so every studio used these big, gigantic movies that they had, they pivoted, put them on streaming, and started to train people just to go to streaming services or to wait for streaming services, and devalued the theatrical experience. I mean, Warner Brothers and HBO Max did day and date release for the entire year of 2021. Pixar didn't release several of their big expensive movies in theaters. They just put them straight on streaming. And like Encanto, Strange World for Disney Plus, they released in theaters and just 1 month later were on streaming. And when you compound this with the one above this, prices are up, income is low. People are like, I'll just wait a few weeks. I'll just wait till it's on streaming. Like, I get to go to movies for free at press screenings most of the time. If I take my kids and we get popcorn and drinks, it's like $50 and we didn't even have to buy movie tickets. It's $100 to take your family to the movies, get tickets, get popcorn and everything like that. Why not just wait a few weeks? Most people these days have awesome TVs that are in 4K with nice sound systems, sound bars or whatever. And when you pay $100 to go to the movies, you might have jerks in the theater, whatever. And so streaming has become this thing that is just stealing people away from the theatrical because I'll just wait a few weeks. Or in some cases, it's already available day and date release. Reason number 4, insane inflated budgets. One of the big things differentiating the hits this year versus the flops wasn't total box office gross. It was the budget. Where if you look at a bunch of the movies that are like surprise hits versus the movies that lost hundreds of millions of dollars, they brought in very close to the same amounts of money, but they spent $250 million on Little Mermaid, and they spent $100 million on Across the Spider-Verse. And the general equation that people use to determine how much a movie needs to make is you do like 2.5 times the production budget is how much a movie needs to make to be profitable, because you need to make back your production budget, you need to make back your marketing budget, and the money, the income is split between the studios and the movie theaters, so you need 2.5 times your budget to be profitable. So if your movie costs $100 million, that's $250 million to be profitable. The Hunger Games prequel didn't actually make insane amounts of gross, but it only cost $100 million, so it's a very profitable film. Whereas Mission Impossible cost $300 million. To be profitable on a $300 million movie, you have to make $750 million just to break even. And if you look at the history of the Mission Impossible movies, the highest grossing ones haven't hit $1 billion. So this was always creating a scenario where there was no margin there. And you just had all of these movies with gigantic budgets that were too big, that demanded, back to number 1 on here, There's not enough demand for movie tickets to justify this many movies that cost $300 million. And you look at some of the surprise hits this year: Across the Spider-Verse, Super Mario Brothers, Hunger Games, Creed, Five Nights at Freddy's. These are movies with budgets $100 million or less. These are not movies with $200 million, $300 million budget. Oppenheimer, $100 million. Barbie, $150 million. The reason that they were highly profitable is because the budgets were reasonable. Fast X, Little Mermaid, Indiana Jones, Mission Impossible, they had crazy budgets that made it very difficult to be profitable. And I think a lot of what went on here is a bunch of ego, in particular on the parts of Disney, where they looked at 2019 and they went, we had 6, kind of 7 billion-dollar films. We have all these franchises. Just throw money at our franchises, throw money at our IP, and it'll make money. People buy tickets for our movies. But they were throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at mediocre scripts or at properties and ideas that simply just don't justify that amount of money. They misread the room. They didn't pay attention to audiences. They didn't stop to think, can this franchise, can an 80-year-old Harrison Ford carry an action blockbuster to $1 billion? Does that really make sense? A movie about an aging, drunk old professor past his prime, can that really make $1 billion? Is that what people want? And their ego just got a hold of them. But also, to be fair, on inflated budgets, the reason a lot of these are $300 million movies was COVID. The budgets were too big. The budgets were inflated. They were throwing money at mediocre scripts, or they're throwing money. There was too much for what the franchise justified. I thought Mission Impossible was great. I think $300 million is way too much to spend on a Mission Impossible movie. But what happened was, these are movies that were going into production, COVID hit. So you had COVID protocols, you had COVID shutdowns, COVID delays, and that dramatically increased the budget on a number of these films. You have to acknowledge that. That was absolutely something that happened, that you're seeing the trickle down of COVID issues this year in particular. But they also really needed to rein in their budgets. If you made an Indiana Jones movie for $100 million, it would have been profitable. But they spent 3 times that amount. There was no chance it could be profitable. Reason number 5, we're inoculated to spectacle. We've been doing this throw $200 million, $250 million, $300 million at an IP, at a franchise for a lot of years now. And by now, we've seen it all before. You can't impress me by being like, this is a Fast and the Furious movie, but this time, there's a wrecking ball. This time, the cars drive really fast down a bridge. You can't impress me by being like, in this movie, the superheroes have capes, fly through a city, a building explodes, there's a sky beam. Like, we've seen all of this before. We've seen planets threatened before. And so just trying to market movies on spectacle, superheroes, flying cars, Transformers, it's not interesting anymore. We've seen it. You have done that. You've thrown $200 million at that before, and you've done it better. So you're just doing a knockoff of yourself, but with a higher budget. And that's what so much of this kind of felt like. I've seen it before, even on movies that I thought were good. Mission Impossible 7, Dead Reckoning. I really enjoyed that movie. I gave that a glowing review. I think it is a very good Mission Impossible movie. But we've seen Tom Cruise go rogue, put his life on the line, and all of this before. We've seen that movie. It's a great version of it, but it wasn't fresh and new. And when I've only got so much money, if I can only see one movie this month because income is down, prices are up, am I going to go see Tom Cruise do the same thing again, or am I going to go see Barbie or watch Christopher Nolan blow up a mountain or whatever he did in Oppenheimer? Like, which one is new? Which one is fresh? Which one is something I haven't seen before? And I think that was a big problem. We've seen so much of this before. and a lot of times we've seen it better. Reason number 7, damaged brands. And this one in particular applies to our superhero genre, where when you look at DC, you had a situation where the franchise was so broken that they decided to reboot the entire thing, and they announced that before a year's worth of movies came out, thus admitting all of these are leftovers. None of these matter. None of these are going anywhere. None of these were written to close out their arcs or anything like that. None of these were written to close out the universe. But yeah, we just gotta crap these things out before we get onto what we're really excited about. You've damaged the brand. You've let the air out of the balloon. You're acknowledging it's not working, and we just gotta get these done before we move on. Damaged brand, and every single one of these DC movies was dead on arrival, partially for that reason. For other reasons we've previously mentioned in here too. But along those same lines, the MCU, the brand's not as strong as it was in 2019, where it felt like they can do no wrong. There was this FOMO, this fear of missing out. And then because of the Disney Plus shows, because of a few flops, a lot of people were like, maybe they should have ended with Endgame. I'll go see Guardians 3, but most of the stuff I don't care about. I haven't caught up on the shows. I watched a few of them. I wasn't crazy about them. So this feels like a sequel to something I didn't care about and watch in the first place. And there were more misses, a Secret Invasion, Thor Love and Thunder, some things, She-Hulk, that made people go, maybe I'm done with the MCU for the most part. And then they do the Marvels, which felt like more of the same, a silly MCU film. It felt like it was following up some things that maybe weren't quite as popular. And some people are like, I don't need to go see this one. I'm not really excited to go see this one. And so you had some damaged brands in there. Or in the case like Pixar, Elemental ended up bringing in a fair bit of money, but the brand isn't what it was a few years back. And some of it just on a theatrical level, you trained people not to go to the movies. So you put out a movie in the theater and then people don't go see the movie. Like, well, right. You told them they can just wait. You trained them to do that. And so it's like they damaged the brand in kind of an interesting way there. They damaged the way people consume the brand. But, Disney in general have made a lot of questionable choices. The quality of their output has dropped over the last several years. The movies aren't as good as they were several years back. There have been more duds. And so then it's like, I'm just not as excited to go see Wish. I'm not as excited to go see this. And I think there's a lot of that this year of these big brands that you think are huge IP. They were, but people aren't excited about them as they were just a few years back. Reason number 8, blockbuster budgets for niche products. This one kind of is targeted a lot at Disney, where what they have done a lot with, like, say, Marvel, is they used to make these big, gigantic 4-quadrant blockbusters that over 25, under 25, men, women, everybody can go watch these movies. There's action, there's comedy. They're generally friendly enough for the whole family. And so they're very broad appeal and designed for a very wide audience. And with Disney Plus, they started to segment that down to where now we're making a movie or a TV show that's a legal rom-com that's designed for like 35-year-old women. And we're doing Miss Marvel, which is very much aimed at tweens, a teenage audience. And then you do Secret Invasion, which is much more mature and grown up. And instead of designing everything to be broad appeal, it's much more segmented. Now, of course, this is Disney Plus. This is not theatrical. But then you put out the Marvels that is following that up. Of this, instead of being very broad appeal, the way Marvel movies were when the first Captain Marvel came out, suddenly you have a movie that's a follow-up to a billion-dollar film, a spinoff of WandaVision, spinoff of the Teeny Bopper show, kind of a follow-up to the show that's for, grown men that want a serious paranoia thriller. So it's like all these segmented audiences that don't really overlap, but this is a sequel to all of them. And so it just like misses everybody. but they spent over $200 million on it. Like the actual spend was $275 million on this thing with this very strange segmented audience kind of going on with it. Or Indiana Jones, like what is the actual audience for an aging action franchise with an 80-year-old star in it that has made no effort to win new fans over in 15 years? Like, I adore Indiana Jones. I could not convince my children to watch the movies when I was rewatching them and lead up to the new one. My wife didn't even want to go see the new one. And we watched Last Crusade multiple times every single year because it just doesn't feel like the actual, like, it's not just Indiana Jones fans. It's Indiana Jones fans that want to watch 80-year-old Indiana Jones who's depressed. It's a segment within a segment, but a $300 million budget. And so I think Disney in particular has done that hubris, that pride we were talking about, just throwing huge amounts of money at something that's actually pretty niche in who wants that specific thing. But you just look at some of these blockbusters, and that's kind of the problem, that there's throwing so much money at something and the audience is not that big and broad. Like there's no possible way you're going to make a profit on that idea with that budget. Reason number 9, more of the same marketing. Great marketing starts with great product development. You design something that people actually want, that scratches an itch, that meets a need. Thus, you're able to market that thing as scratching that itch, meeting that need. Thus, people buy the product. But if your product is mediocre, if it's more of the same, then you're putting out very bland, generic trailers that it's like, oh, there's just another one of those coming out. And you look at the trailers for so many of these $300 million movies this year, and it was, look, another Pixar film. Look, another Indiana Jones film. The music's playing. Look, The Marvels. It's another Marvel movie, but this one, it's funny this time. It's goofy and silly. But it's just doing that. They're not marketing it on what makes it interesting, unique, stands out. There's not like a clever spin on anything. It's just new thing, new Transformers movie coming out. This one with a new kind of Transformer in it, but just more Transformers stuff, more comic book stuff, more Shazam stuff. Because that's what the movie is, because the product is that, the trailers themselves feel like that. Counterbalance that with Barbie. Barbie was something fresh and new, and the trailers felt fresh, new, and interesting. And there were like displays in like my movie theaters where you could get your picture taken in a Barbie box. Why? The movie was something different, therefore the marketing could be something different. And you can look at some of these other ones that did stand out, that popped, that were surprise hits. There was something different about them. The movie had something fresh to offer, therefore the marketing could do something different and interesting. And you look at the campaigns for these Flopbusters, just, there's another one, more stuff, super generic, bland trailers. Wish. Look, a new Disney movie that feels like other Disney movies you've seen before. Nothing fresh, interesting, and new. Just marketed it as more of that thing you like. Real quick, I wanted to talk about the strikes. When I said I was doing this video, a bunch of people brought up the writers and actors strikes as cause for a number of these Flopbusters. The strikes are not one of my 10 reasons. And the reason for that is I think the writer's strike, I don't think has anything to do with the movie flopping, because the writers not being able to go out and do interviews, that's not what causes a movie to not make money. Now, part of big promotional tours is having the actors go and promote the films and do red carpets and all of that fun stuff. That's part of the promotion. The actors' strike started in July. And a bunch of the July movies had already done some of their promotion prior to the strike starting. So they actually got that stuff done. And when you get past July into August and September and October, those weren't really blockbusters. Your past blockbuster season, like I think that Blue Beetle probably was really hurt by not being able to do a big press tour with the actors because it's a less familiar character. But that movie didn't cost $250 million. It underperformed, but it didn't cost $250 million. So I wouldn't call it a flopbuster the way I would call Flash a flopbuster. Flash cost twice as much as Blue Beetle. And the Marvels was hurt by not being able to do press tour, but I think all of these other things were the problem with the Marvels. If you could do a big press tour, let's say that movie opened 50% more opening weekend. That's still $75 million. It's still a terrible number for the movie's budget. Still doesn't really make money. And the strikes ended after that movie's opening weekend, so they could do a press tour. It still didn't help the movie have legs. It was dead on arrival. There was not interest in that film. So the strikes hurt the overall fall box office, but I don't think they were the cause of the flopbusters. The $250 million, $300 million films that underperformed. Reason number 10, too many movies requiring too much homework. Now, when it comes to this, when people all the time are like, what are you talking about? This wasn't a problem with Endgame. That was the sequel to 21 movies, and people were willing to do that. What are you talking about? People watch TV shows all the time. All you have to do is watch this. All you have to do is this. Sure. But when you're in a marketplace where there's too many blockbusters, where prices are up, income is down, when movies are dropping on streaming just a few weeks later, all of a sudden, do I go see Mission Impossible where I need to watch 6 previous movies that I haven't seen before to understand it, or do I just wait and see Oppenheimer next weekend? Do I go see The Marvels, which requires me to rewatch Captain Marvel, watch a bunch of TV shows I wasn't interested in, or do I see the other movie coming out? Do I go see Across the Spider-Verse next weekend, or do I rewatch 9 Fast and Furious movies to try and understand the new one? Like, in that marketplace where you have to pick one or the other, which one is the one I'm more likely to go see? The one with homework or the one without homework? I had so many people asking me, which Mission Impossible movies do I need to watch to understand the new movie? Whenever a new Marvel movie comes out, people ask me, which shows do I need to watch to understand this movie? More and more, that's a question. Like, I work that into the mixed section of my reviews now very frequently. Here's what you need to watch to understand this movie. Here's what I recommend watching before watching this movie to be able to understand it. Because so many movies these days are following up so much stuff. And people get tired of it. They only have so much time. It's not that they can't do the homework, but they can't do the homework for all of the things. All of them. Therefore, they go to the thing of least resistance. Barbie, Super Mario Brothers, Five Nights at Freddy's. As I said at the beginning, it's not that all of these movies have all 10 of these, or any one of these is what destroyed one of them. It's usually a few of them, where you have a damaged brand in a month that's crowded, where you have a movie that its budget is way too big, plus you have to do some homework. There's normally several things kind of layering on top of each other, and that's what caused an individual film to underperform. When you're talking about patterns for a whole year with a bunch of different movies from a bunch of different studios with a bunch of different scenarios related to them, there's a lot of factors. You know, Ezra Miller kind of had a lot of scandal surrounding the star of The Flash. That's not a pattern that applied to a bunch of other movies, but it applied to that specific one. So each of them have their unique controversies, their unique complications. But I think these were the patterns when I looked at the movies that seemed to be recurring things throughout the year. Hopefully, Hollywood will dial it back. They'll focus in on making better scripts and be less about throwing money just at properties. But we'll see what happens. Remember, there's a companion video to this over on Patreon with 5 things that this year's hits did right. There's a bunch of exclusives over there for as little as $2 per month, $21 per year. You can get all of the exclusives that I have over there, or for $40 per month, you can do a video chat with me. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing Christmas. Happy holidays. and keep talking movies and TV too much in 2024.